NBA fans, we're back for another installment. This time for the all-time 5 greatest players for each franchise. This time it's the Detroit Pistons, folks. If this is your first time catching the series, if you want to catch the other videos, I got the playlist both in the description and in the comments. Now, with that being said, let's get into it. If this is your first time catching this series, real quick, the big thing for me to make this more challenging is I set up an asterisk, that I can only use a certain player one time the entire series. So that'll factor in, interestingly, with teams like the Miami Heat, Cleveland Cavaliers, Orlando Magic, Los Angeles Lakers, Boston Celtics, and so on. But with that being said, here are top 5 Detroit Pistons of all time. Before I get into the actual 5, a few honorable mentions worth acknowledging. Cade Cunningham. Now, Cade's an honorable mention because he's still early in his career, and so far this season has been his best statistical season. He's at least worth acknowledging. This year, you're starting to see the Pistons be more competitive and see Cade take that next step. And maybe a few years from now, the Pistons are back in contention in the East, and Cade's one of the top players. But as of right now, he's just an honorable mention because he's just starting to boom. Another one is Vinnie Johnson, a 6-man during the bad boy era. Now, Vinnie Johnson himself wasn't the greatest player in the world, not the most important piece, but he was a good, valuable 6-man for the bad boy Pistons, at least worth the acknowledgement. From the late 90s, you got Jerry Stackhouse. And he was eventually traded to the Wizards, and they got Rip Hamilton. But Jerry Stackhouse was a good offensive player, averaging over 20 a game. During that era, averaging slightly over 20 a game was a big deal in that era. We were still kind of in the low scoring era. And Jerry Stackhouse was an offensive machine for the Detroit Pistons during that late 90s, early 2000s era. And the last one, some of you guys would probably have him in your top 5, but I knocked him down to honorable mention. That's Big Ben Wallace. The shot blocking machine during the mid-2000s Detroit Pistons, the back-to-back finals appearances. And he was a 4-time Defensive Player of the Year. He was the it factor on defense for the Detroit Pistons in that 2004 championship run and them getting back to the finals in 2005. Certainly worth acknowledging, but the reason I have him as honorable mention is because there's 2 other players from that era that were more vital. And that'll be 5 and 4 respectively. But the reason I put Ben as honorable mention is because 5 and 4 were around those 06, 07, 07, 08 seasons when they were still contenders, when Ben Wallace went to the Chicago Bulls. So that's the only reason I knocked him down to honorable mention. Now on to the actual list itself. Starting off at number 5, Ben Wallace's teammate Rip Hamilton. And he was, like I said, involved in the Jerry Stackhouse trade. He joined them in the 02-03 season, and Rip Hamilton had himself a good run with the Pistons. Yeah, he was a great assist and rebound man and good offensive player. Not a great offensive player, but he was good on both sides of the ball. He was good, and that played a vital role in that Detroit Pistons chemistry as a team. And that was the big thing with that Pistons team. They weren't the greatest individual players, but they played great off each other, and Rip Hamilton was vital in that. As a scorer and as an assist man, when you factor the 2 together, he certainly played a great role in that Detroit Pistons championship team, and them staying contenders for years afterward. Because as soon as he got there, the Pistons took a bit of a step up into becoming contenders. Another player that helped the Pistons in that rebuild to becoming contenders and eventually champions was Chauncey Billups, Mr. Big Shot. He was kind of a similar player to a Rip Hamilton, but looking back on it, I feel Billups was more vital, and here's the reason why. Although him and Rip were similar statistically, you remember that 08-09 season, the Allen Iverson, Chauncey Billups trade. Chauncey went to the Nuggets, and the Nuggets made it to the conference finals, while the Pistons took a bit of a step down. So that's why I lean toward Chauncey Billups ahead of Rip Hamilton. I feel his role was more valuable. When you look at the fact he came in 02-03, they were the number 1 seed. They made a push to the conference finals and lost to the Nets. But then they came back the next year, won the finals, made it back to the finals in 2005. Were still contenders the entire time Chauncey Billups was there. But it was after he left, they started to slowly decline. So, he was a good scorer. He got the big shots that they needed, but he also was good assist man. And you could see the team chemistry was great during his time. Now moving on to number 3. Now we're going back exclusively to the bad boy Pistons era. Starting with number 3, we got Bill Lambieer, the center. Now he was the building block for that bad boy Piston. He was there before Joe Dumars, Isiah Thomas, before they became the big 3 in the bad boy Piston. He was a rebound machine. He was also the guy that played dirty, which I personally wasn't a fan of, but at the same time, that physical style of play, whether I'm a fan of it or not, was a key contributor to that bad boy Pistons team winning back-to-back chips, 89 and 90. And Bill Lambieer was the first piece to help set that up. Like I said, he was a great rebounder, and he was there from the rebuild, the build-up, all the way through to the 2 championships. He's one of those. And now I'm going to go to number 2. That's Joe Dumars, part of who I feel is the greatest backcourt in NBA history currently. That is, Joe Dumars. He was the number 2 guy in that. He was the 89 Finals MVP, their first time they won in the back-to-back championships. He was also a 6-time All-Star. Now, his point totals weren't the greatest, but he was sharing duties with the number 1 guy on this list. You guys probably already know who that is. But Joe Dumars is certainly an important figure in that Detroit Pistons franchise history. Key contributor to their early championship wins. Now, number 1. That's Isiah Thomas, considered one of the top 5 greatest point guards in NBA history. And, rightfully the greatest Detroit Piston. He was an all-around machine on both sides of the ball. Rebounds, assists, scoring. And Isiah Thomas, key contributing factor to. He was the biggest star of that bad boy Pistons team. No mistake. You had Lambieer. You had Vinnie Johnson, a good big. You had Adrian Dantley. But without Isiah Thomas, they don't win those back-to-back chips at all. So he's the most important part of that picture. Not to mention, those Pistons teams led by Isiah Thomas beat the Michael Jordan Bulls 3 times in the playoffs. And eventually, yes, Jordan and the Bulls figured out how to beat them, and they took over from there. But Isiah Thomas, leading the way for the Pistons, also played a key role in stopping Jordan from winning more rings and stopping the Bulls from taking off sooner than they did. They were the only true team in the East during the Jordan era in Chicago that actually had their number for a period of time. Isiah Thomas led the way. Matter of fact, he was such a thorn in Jordan's side, Jordan still to this day resents him. And that was part of the reason he wasn't on the 92 Dream Team. But with that being said, that's another discussion for another time. But Isiah Thomas was also the 85 season assist leader, 90s final MVP, and, easily worthy of the greatest Detroit Piston of all time. And that's my list. You guys want to comment, give me your list of your top 5 Pistons of all time? Feel free to do so. If you want to do that and throw some honorable mentions, you're more than welcome to in the comments. And with that being said, also make sure to drop a like and subscribe if you want more content. And coming up next on my top 5 greatest players installment, the Golden State Warriors, counting both their running Golden State and their days back as the Philadelphia Warriors. So stay tuned. Until then, peace.